One tenant advocate wants to amend the Fair Housing Act and make it a crime for landlords to screen tenants based on their criminal history. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the whole thing now where they are pushing to make it harder for landlords to screen tenants based on their criminal backgrounds. Now, I have no issues with that, and any landlord knows that if we aren't able to screen a tenant, if we're not able to look into their criminal history, we could easily be putting someone into our properties who's gonna, tear it up or steal from us or terrorize the other tenants or be doing criminal activity within our units. So there's a big reason why, I believe that it is a very important tool for tenant screening. Now, obviously, the far left progressive anti-landlord group, what they're doing is they're saying, oh, well, this disproportionately affects minorities, and so therefore you shouldn't be able to do it at all, without looking at the fact that, hey, well, there's a lot of minority landlords, right? So are you saying that I'm discriminating against, other minorities? Are you saying that I don't have a right to protect my property and put the best tenant in there possible? I mean, what are you trying to say here? I mean, the one thing, or are you saying that all people of minority groups are all criminals? Because those are the things that you're implying with this sort of legislation and these sort of ideas, as though people who are minorities couldn't rent a place unless we throw out all the rules saying criminal convictions. Well, that is insulting. Okay, it's insulting to me and it's insulting to other people, and I really don't like that kind of talk in the first place. But more importantly, it's taken away one of the landlord's most important tools. So yeah, I believe that I did a video on New Jersey. The state of New Jersey actually passed a law saying that you couldn't look at the tenant's criminal history anymore when, screening your tenants. Now, that's insane, okay? And for a fact the landlords are still doing it. I bet they're just going around the law. I'm not suggesting that you break the law wherever you're at, but when a law is unworkable, when a law makes it so that you can't run your business, it is bound to be broken by a lot of people. Okay, that's the truth. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. What do you think of these laws where they're saying, hey, landlords, they can no longer look at the tenant's criminal history when screening? Now, personally, right, I do look at criminal history, right? I know there's a lot of landlords who don't. There's landlords out there who will, forgive things depending on how long ago it was done. And, the article I have today, it's about a tenant who has a pretty old criminal conviction and still is having difficulty getting housing. And, it's understandable why the landlords have these rules in place, and I don't think this one anecdotal experience from the writer of this article is enough to make me want to change my rules on tenant screening, or to say that, hey, I'm going to force all landlords in the entire country to comply by these rules. One little anecdotal experience doesn't represent the majority of the people who have those types of criminal convictions, and there's a reason why we want to keep them out of our properties. So, this article, it's written from a tenant's perspective. So keep that in mind as I'm going through it. And I'm going to rip it apart as I'm going. This article, it's coming from thecrimерeport.org, and it says, how an algorithm made me homeless. All right. Yeah, tenant-friendly article, but let's get into it. It wasn't the best time to make a move considering the housing market crunch with its spiking prices, low inventory, bidding wars, and seller-friendly closing conditions, but a job transition made it necessary. After a 3-month search, I found an apartment in a private development in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It offered the amenities we wanted: a good neighborhood, a reasonable market rate, and proximity to high-performing schools. I submitted the $75 application and information needed for the background check. As we started packing, I received notice that my application results were complete. Denied. It couldn't be my credit rating, income, or employment record. Perhaps it was a misunderstanding, a mix-up with my name. I was shocked when I scrolled down to discover the reason. It was my criminal record. Yeah, And a lot of landlords will automatically deny, depending on the severity of the criminal record. And that is the only way that they can be safe. Okay. So, let's keep going though. 25 years ago, when I was a teenager, I was arrested in Wisconsin for the distribution of drugs. I served 5 years and used that time to earn a degree and push myself in new directions. I achieved enough success in my business ventures, ironically, in low-income rental housing, to be featured on Good Morning America. But as I stood over a cardboard box half filled with kitchen items, I realized my assumption that I had transcended my past was at the mercy of an algorithm, and in turn, to the lingering legacy of the war on drugs. No, it's not the lingering legacy of the war on drugs, okay? And you making it, you're very much downplaying the crime that you committed, okay? And if you want more respect from me and from landlords, you need to be very much upfront about it. Nobody cares that, you have a good income or any of this stuff, right? What we can see is you did 5 years in prison, okay? 5 years in prison. You said, it was when I was a teenager. Well, you don't do 5 years in prison, unless you're like 18, 19 years old. So, for 5 years, you did time in prison. And for distribution of drugs, this isn't, somebody who was smoking a joint on a street corner. You're not fooling anybody. Well, you're not fooling me at least, okay? Because I'm an actual law enforcement officer and I know what kind of crime you have to do in order to get a 5-year prison sentence, okay? And that means that you were probably either drug smuggling, you were a drug dealer, okay? Probably with other things. You might have had weapons on you at the time, okay? Gang, perhaps. I'm not 100% sure, but guess what? 5 years in prison says more about the crime you committed than you're letting on in this article. And so you have to at least, right? It's good that you turned your life around. It's good that you became a constructive, part of society now. But you have to admit that if I was a private landlord, right, and I had a plethora of excellent tenants to move into my property, why would I give the guy who did 5 years in prison and has a felony conviction a chance over the dozens who don't? Okay? I would automatically deny you as well, especially right now. There are more renters than there are units available. So you have to admit that, hey, I have this huge black mark on me because I screwed up in the past, and this is the consequence of my previous actions. When you mess up, you have to deal with it. And sometimes in a case like this, it's forever. So don't try to downplay it. While a blemished background has always imposed barriers on prospective renters, the widespread adoption of national tenant screening services over the past decade has made things more challenging. Designed to synthesize credit, rental, and criminal history, screening services summarily return a yes or no assessment that reduces a landlord's rental risk while ensuring FHA compliance and speeding up approval times. Well, here's the funny part. You said that you were in low-income housing and you don't know this? Okay, you don't think this is fair? Well, you know what? I'm betting money that you don't actually work for a for-profit business and you don't actually run your own rental property business. You probably were working for some kind of charity or nonprofit or government agency, and that's the only thing you know about low-income housing. Because if you knew anything about actually running a business, you'd be like, oh, no, of course I'm going to deny people with criminal records. They've been tearing up my properties for years. And maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you would be one of those landlords who allows those people into your property, right? But that's your choice if you are a private owner. That's not something that you should be forcing upon all other landlords. But I'm going to skip down a little bit in this article and talk about what this guy wants to do to, force landlords into basically a worse situation. So he says here, it is long past time to amend the Fair Housing Act, Section 807B4, which allows landlords to permanently ban renters convicted of the manufacturing and distribution of drugs. Ordinances such as the first-in-time rule in Seattle, where landlords must publish the criteria for renting a unit and rent to the first person who applies and qualifies, are promising initiatives to bring transparency to the opaque process faced by many. You know, I think my biggest problem with this article is you are trying to pass a law based on your own personal circumstance, even if you don't even represent the majority. Okay, so the majority of these people who are coming out of prison, etc., right, they still have a lot of issues. They still are, you know, in constant problems, and there's a reason why a lot of landlords just don't want to have to deal with it. Okay, now maybe you turned out good, maybe your crime was a long time ago, but do I want to take that chance with my property, the property that I spent hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on? Maybe not. Okay, so you know this is ridiculous. You're trying to change the national law and get it to the point where, hey, you know, we should amend the Fair Housing Act to force landlords to take these criminal. No. Okay, I'll never support that, and hopefully that never changes. And even worse, you're saying, oh, we should be imitating what's going on in Seattle. Well, Seattle's a mess, okay? Seattle is a anti-landlord place, and they don't even believe in property rights there. And their little first-in-time law is a nightmare for anyone who, even if you have just one property. So, you know, you're completely screwing people over with this nonsense because you had trouble renting a place. Well, you know what you need to do? If the crime, if it's able to be expunged, you need to work on that. Okay, working on your expungement from your criminal history so that you don't have all these difficulties. Otherwise, you just need to face the fact that, hey, I screwed up bad, and now for the rest of my life I have to face these consequences. Okay, so you know, interesting article, but man, very, very frustrating.